lunchtime. Committee members, we'll reconvene the meeting for the second hour portion and welcome Minister Gould to the meeting. I would like to, before we get a few comments, as you are aware, witnesses can choose the official language of their choice to speak in. And if there's an issue with translation, please get my attention and we'll suspend while it's clarified. I would also advise those appearing to direct their questions through either chair, and we will proceed with when we get to the questioning rounds. So today again, I want to welcome Minister Karina Gould, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Welcome, Minister. And from the department, we have Laurie McDonald, Senior Associate Deputy Minister, Peter Simeone, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Evelyn Power, Director General. Welcome to the committee, and I believe the Minister is going to start with a 5-minute opening statement, following which we'll open the floor to questions. Madam Minister, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee today about passport service delays. It's important to acknowledge we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, responsibility for the passport program is shared between Service Canada and the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada.
DCC manages the policy, forecasting, and systems and program architecture, while Service Canada manages the processing and delivery of passports to Canadians. Before the pandemic, passport volume was predictable, moving through 5-year cycles of low volume, around 2.5 million, and high volume, up to 5 million. 2022 was forecast to be the last year of low volume before a surge in renewals begins in 2023. These cycles are planned for and forecasted. L'arrivée de la COVID-19.
The arrival of COVID-19 in Canada impacted the passport program in 2 important ways. First, restrictions imposed to protect the health and safety of Service Canada staff and clients led to closed offices and restricted capacity, both inside our facilities and in program delivery. Second, because people weren't traveling, they weren't applying for passports.
Capacity were aligned. Now, this changed this spring. With travel opening up, the number of passport applications has surged. Not only are we seeing those who would predictably be applying for passports on a 5-year cycle, but we are receiving applications from those who otherwise would have applied in the previous 2 pandemic years. And we are seeing much of that volume arrive all at once, rather than spread out during the year. Meanwhile, Service Canada still had public health obligations to staff and clients. There was a mismatch between demand and the capacity to meet it. Statistics help tell the story. Beginning in April 2020, for the first pandemic year, Service Canada issued about 360,000 passports. During the next year, Service Canada issued about 1.2 million passports. Mais cette année, au cours.
But this year, during the months of March and April alone, Service Canada received almost 500,000 applications. Service Canada now expects to receive 4.2 million passport applications this year.
That's more than 3 times as many as last year, with a huge proportion of that volume arriving now. The fact of the matter is that while we were anticipating increased volume, this massive surge in demand has outpaced forecasts and outstripped capacity. The government is acutely aware of the impact this is having on Canadians. We know many people have been put in very difficult circumstances. And that is why I have directed officials to work as hard as possible to meet the demand and to examine their operations to ensure they're doing everything they can to meet this demand. And officials have acted. Dans tous les coins du pays, notre personnel.
In every corner of the country, staff are working overtime to help Canadians get their passports. Service Canada is hiring and training more staff. Since January, 600 new employees have been onboarded to assist in processing applications.
Service Canada was once again able to open all passport service counters. This is about a 40% increase, and it returns our centres to their pre-pandemic service capacity. La capacité dans les
Capacity in waiting rooms was also significantly expanded while continuing to adhere to health and safety protocols. Despite these actions, processing times remain long due to the sheer volume of applications.
97% of Canadians who apply in person at a specialized passport office receive their passports in fewer than 10 business days. However, in light of the unprecedented volume of passport applications received by mail, about 96% of those who apply by mail receive their passports within 50 business days. Comme nous l'avons annoncé,
As we announced earlier this year, to meet demand, we have simplified the renewal process for passports.
applicants don't need to have a guarantor or provide their original documents and ID. These changes make renewing a passport easier and faster while maintaining program security and integrity. Je demande aussi aux Canadiens
I also ask Canadians with no immediate travel plans to check the expiry date of their passports.
no immediate plans to travel. There are over 300 Service Canada centres that are available to receive passport applications in person. No proof of travel is needed. And I do encourage Canadians to check the expiration date on their passports and to ensure they have a valid passport before booking travel, unless, of course, there's an unforeseen emergency. I also encourage Canadians to go to a Service Canada site so as to avoid accidental errors in their application. Applications by mail often have a rate of 25% with accidental mistakes that require verification and slow down the process. Mr. Chairman, I want to assure you and members of the committee that Service Canada is working flat out to deliver passports to Canadians as quickly as possible. As members of Parliament, our offices have heard from constituents looking for urgent help, my own office included. Des situations
Frustrating situations have arisen at Service Canada centres as staff deal with the surge in demand. We know there is renewed excitement for Canadians to see their friends and loved ones again and to explore the world outside our borders.
excitement bumps up against the reality of long lines and uncertainty. It creates stress and concern. And that is why we will continue to do everything necessary to ensure Canadians receive the service they're entitled to. Thank you. Merci. Je suis prête à répondre à vos questions. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I will now open the floor for questioning, beginning with Madame Kuzi. Madame Kuzi for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Minister, for being here today. Minister, you address the foreseen demands, but the increase in demand for passport renewals should have been easy for the government to predict as more Canadians needed to update their travel documents. Further, this is the 10-year anniversary of implementing the 10-year passport, and a predictable increase in demand was foreseeable. You talked about some performance measures. Well, between April 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2021, Service Canada issued 363,000 passports. Yet in the same time frame, the following year, 1,273,000 passports were issued. So this number is still down from the 2.3 million processed between April 2019 and March 2020. So Canadians rightfully expect to be able to get basic government services, such as passports, from the Government of Canada. Minister, we look to the media and we see many, frankly, horror stories from Canadians. I have here a story from Global News on May 24th. A BC family said they had to shell out $3,000 for a new flight for their family vacation after they didn't receive their passports on time. Ms. Ventura said her family had been trying to plan a trip for a while to go to Orlando, Florida with her niece and nephew. She said they had let their children's passports expire during COVID, so in February, when they went in person to apply at the passport office, they were told they would receive their passports in the mail by April or even sooner. Well, unfortunately, Minister, they didn't arrive. She says, my husband went the week we were supposed to leave. He went to Passport Canada, she said. We got new passport applications in case they could do an emergency one. He was told we couldn't get an emergency passport at that time. The office requested the documents to be sent to the Service Canada office in Surrey, but they could not guarantee that the passports were going to arrive on time. The week they were supposed to leave, Minister, the passports still had not come. So they made the decision to change the flight to leave from Seattle, which of course also hurts our economy, as children do not need passports to fly within the United States. The cost of buying new flights on Delta Airlines was $3,000. Ms. Ventura said Service Canada told her staff they are doing the best that they can, and we recognize this. The family also couldn't claim a flight change refund through travel insurance. What she said was, when there was no responsibility, that was the frustrating part. Minister, I have another story about a family that tried to go to Disneyland on a trip for a woman with terminal cancer, but unfortunately, after a passport delay, it was put off for some time. Ask Barb Walter's family, and they'll tell you the 56-year-old grandmother would give anything for her loved ones. But since they found out she has terminal cancer, the family said they've been scrambling to give back to her with a trip to Disneyland in California. They said they wanted to make the trip as a family so Walter can make lasting memories with her 3 beloved grandchildren. And I know as a mother you'll appreciate this. This could very well be the last thing she gets to do with us as a family while she's still in any capacity to be able to leave the house, said Brandon Williams, 42, Walter's son-in-law and the father of her grandchildren, speaking from the family's home in Hope. She wanted to take the family to Disneyland and make this trip happen any way possible, part of her bucket list. But the trip is in question, Brandon said, because of delays of the kids getting their passports. Williams' wife and Walter's stepdaughter, Shan Williams, applied in late April for passports, and their 3 kids, ages 3 to 7, as soon as they found out. They applied by priority mail in the Lower Mainland. Their flight from Vancouver to California is set for June 3rd, and I hope they can make that flight. But unfortunately, this is now extending into other services. Backlogs and bottlenecks in passport processing through Service Canada appear to be causing problems for clients seeking other core services through the facilities, such as death benefits or employment insurance, as is reported in a May 25th Global News article, Minister. So unfortunately, this is extending into other areas we are seeing. Now, Minister, I look at the dates of the announcements of the travel restrictions, the ones which have been being lifted. February 15th, it was announced the 28th, fully vaccinated individuals only had to produce antigen tests. April 1st was announced on March 17th. Yet, Minister, you had announcements regarding daycare March 31st Ontario of this year, March 28th for Ontario of this year, March 31st of Nova Scotia, and yet the first article, Minister, came out March 8th on these passport delays, which tells me you didn't prioritize these passports or these Service Canada services to your daycare initiative. And you should have taken care of these Canadians first before you continued this initiative. You should have made the difference in your prioritization. And as a result of that, women such as Ms. Walters may not get to go to Disneyland with her family. Families such as the Venturas won't be able to go on their bucket list trip without paying another $3,000, Minister. Minister, I wish you would have prioritized things differently as a minister. And as I mentioned in the May 25th article, we are now seeing these passport bottlenecks spilling over to EI and CPP applicants, which has significant effects on our Canadian society, Minister. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Minister, the time is up. We'll now go to Mr. Long for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues. And Minister, thank you so much for coming before HUMA today. Before I start, I do want to thank you for the National Child Care Program. It's unbelievable the impact it's having on families right across the country, but in particular in my riding in St. John Rossay. I mean, families are literally saving thousands of dollars per year. So I want to thank you for your leadership on that. You're truly, it's a transformational program, and you should be very, 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 very proud of it. Now, back to passports. Minister, do you have any specific advice for Canadians who are planning their summer vacation and now realizing that they need to get their travel documents in order. I have heard from many constituents, obviously, we've all got calls, but in my riding of St. John Rothsay, and my constituency staff have also been dealing with a high volume of calls on the issue. The individuals who have applied within an appropriate time frame are being bumped by those who are applying at the last minute. I have also heard that those who have applied for renewal, but because they indicated their upcoming travel was via land border and not via air, they have not been dealt with as quickly. Due to this, many of my constituents are becoming very nervous, especially after media reports of long waits, and want to make sure we let them know the best way to proceed so that their documents get processed in time. Minister, what message would you like to send Canadians? What's the best approach here? And what do you recommend that Canadians do to ensure they receive passports in time for travel? And what do you recommend to those that are still waiting? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Long. And maybe I can just start by addressing some of the things that Ms. Kuzi said, because she took up the whole time. But the first one is that some of those stories are heartbreaking, and we understand that this is challenging for Canadians. In that instance, if someone has urgent travel in that regard, I would recommend you contact your Member of Parliament, because there is an MP line that can contact Service Canada directly, because we want to avoid any of those situations. So please know that if you have that kind of urgent travel, that you haven't received your passport and it's 7 days out and you replied ahead of time, please do contact your MP so that we can address those issues. And for those that have contacted us that way, we have been able to get their passports in time, because we don't want that situation to occur. Now, with regards to your questions, Mr. Long, anyone who has urgent travel, so travel within 45 days or less, we do recommend the best way to get your passport in a timely manner is to go to a specialized passport office. One of the changes that has happened is that pre-pandemic, we would see about 80% of passport applications coming in through passport offices and about 20% by mail. In the pandemic, that ratio has flipped, and so we are now back at full capacity at passport offices, so have the ability to process in person at a much quicker rate. And in-person services, you see 97% of people receiving their passports within 10 business days. So if you have urgent travel, please do go to the passport office. If your travel is beyond 45 business days, we would ask that you go to one of the 300 Service Canada centres around the country. And they can take in your passport. They can't process it on site, so the times are similar to if you were to send it in mail. But the reason why we encourage people to go in person is because you'll actually see a Service Canada citizen officer that can check and review your application to make sure everything is there. Because part of the challenge is that we get about 25% of applications that come in through the mail channel that have errors, accidental, but they require additional processing and verification time. So this is just one way to make that process simpler. And again, these offices are fully open and able to process people in a much quicker way. And just one other note, and we'll let you get to your next question, I'll be very quick, is that it does take longer to process children's passports than it would a simple renewal for adults. And that's because, as everyone can understand, we want to ensure that both parents are okay with the child getting a passport and okay with the travel plans, because unfortunately we do have instances where one parent might take a child or want to take a child out of the country without the approval. So it is really important that that security check happens.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, I'll share the rest of my time with MP Collins. Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Yep, thanks. Very quickly, Mr. Chair, through you to Madam Minister, and Minister, welcome again today. I know that you and officials are aware that the volume of applications are poised to increase again early next year, as the 10-year passports that Canadians applied for a decade ago are poised to expire at leading into the new year. So could you relay to the committee what plans are in place to address the pending additional volume of passports that will come your way early next year?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Collins. And actually, this is an important point just to clarify. The volume that we're experiencing right now is not a result of the 10-year renewals. Those are starting in early January. Right now, it is purely passports that have expired over the last 2 years or this year, or people who are seeking a passport for the first time. 85% of the passport applications that we're getting are first-time passport applications. But I'll turn it over to Lori to talk about our plans for the upcoming surge.
You, Minister, our time is over. You may be able to get that in with a follow-up question. Madame Chabot, à vous la parole.
The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good day, Madam Minister. Well, this motion for this study on passport application delays was agreed on as a topic of the study. The Conservatives, as we know, tend to say in media and have written in the media as well a lot about this massive amount of criticisms from citizens. So indeed, we have moved to study this because we would like to hear what you intend to do to respond to citizens' needs rather than tell citizens what they should be doing. We should be in a position to rightfully expect from Service Canada, and I do know, of course, that civil servants do work hard, but we should be in our rights to receive answers that are adjusted, well adapted, and tailored to our needs. This was a foreseeable problem. According to the Bloc Québécois, there are 150 files. I was hoping to hear you say that the types of problems we're hearing about were not necessarily up to MPs to handle. Do you think that our offices should be filling in for Services Canada? Obviously, the answer will be no. If we hear that there are 150 files, that's fine. Then if you want to send them to us, as we did for Employment Canada, I would say no, that's not the answer there either. So how can we see to it that there will be someone at the end of the line when we call to see to it that we can make appointments? You know, much can be blamed on COVID, but we expect Service Canada to be responsive to the needs of Canada's citizens, and right now that's certainly not the case. So what's your response? How is this going to be solved? Thank you, Ms. Chabot. As I have said, my office is there for citizens, for you, as is the MP office, ideally, especially for emergency situations, urgent cases. And I certainly would think that as MPs, we're very happy to help when we can, as we did with employment insurance. I do have someone in my office who helps all the MPs of the Bloc Québécois Party with employment insurance and with passports, and we'll continue to do this. I know that many of you have worked closely with my office, where we certainly don't want to focus only on the types of, we don't want to hear the types of cases that Ms. Kuzi has presented to us today. This is unfortunate. So what's the solution? Yes, as I have said several times in the House of Commons, as of January, we have hired about 600 new employees because we could see that there would be a surge. And we have modified a number of our internal procedures. And I will ask my colleagues, the civil servants here, to explain a little bit about how that has been undertaken in our offices and how the call center processes have been changed as well. It's important to keep in mind that in February of this year, we were receiving 50,000 calls a week. Now, 200,000 a week. So perhaps Ms. Powers can give us a bit of information. Yes, let's begin with the call centers, if I may. As Madam Minister has indicated, in February, we were receiving 50,000 calls a week. In April, 1.2 million calls every week. We worked with Rogers and Shared Services Canada to change our technology to ensure that Canadians would be better able to access our offices and they wouldn't need to call back time and time again. We, of course, understand how frustrating this is. Certainly not the type of service that we can allow ourselves to be offering Canadians right now. Canadians no longer receive a rapid signal, a busy signal when they call. They receive information about services available in person on the website, as well as information about the availability of agents at the centre. Right now, we're receiving about 450 to 500,000 calls a week, only the in-person calls that are actually dealt with. So that's a 50% improvement. We have also added 60 agents to the 150 that we had priorly. We're also bringing in new agents to cover the 1-800-CANADA call line to share the work. We also often receive information requests. Thank you, but can we be assured that people, as of now, will be able to have meeting times, actually set times, and could we get back to the 30-day service standard rather than 50 days? I could begin with an answer. Indeed, as you have heard, the demand and for the quantity of passports has been really, really high. We have taken a number of steps in the call centres and in the actual Service Canada offices, hiring new agents in order to be able to receive more people, to process more applications, even in person. That said, the number of renewal applications remain very high. Now, there's a pretty good guarantee that you will receive your passport in 9 days if you go by post, if you use mail in your application, but 10 days at a service centre. So much depends on how you make your application. But we are working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to improve the service standard, or to meet the service standards and improve services. That said, the number of passport renewal applications is really high, not something we can handle overnight. Thank you, Ms. Chabot.
Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the Minister for coming to speak with us today. And I just wanted to speak about the mail-ins and some of the issues that have been coming through my office. I think that definitely Canadians that are waiting feel that there's limited transparency in the process and little confidence in that the answers that they're getting on the phone are varying depending on who they call and which day. So I'm going to talk about one specific case, Minister, because it came to your office this week. It came to me multiple times. My office has been trying to deal with it. A family who's been trying to get passports since March and got conflicting information from Service Canada, and finally was told to go to a service center in Vancouver and to pay the $145. And these are two essential workers that don't have the ability to get away. So this is a problem and a concern. So I guess, first of all, can I reach out to your office this week and deal with some of these passport mail-ins that have been in limbo since March with conflicting answers when our office calls Service Canada? And also, could you share some transparency for the citizens of Canada about what the process is, what the prioritization is, and why those that mailed in March haven't seen a passport, some of them, but those that have the ability to get to service centers are being prioritized ahead. Just some transparency around that. Thank you.
First of all, Ms. Zerillo, my office will follow up with yours right now. So we'll follow up on that specific incident and try to get it solved. I'll turn to Ms. Power to talk about the prioritization and the service standards.
Thank you. So as we've mentioned, because of volume, we are prioritizing clients with travel plans. And so the in-person services that are provided have up till now been limited. Right now, they're limited to anyone with travel plans identified within 45 business days. That allows us to move those folks as quickly as possible through the process. The process in person, if you'll recall, the passport process is a paper-based process. It was never intended to be moved to the extent that it is through the mail service. And prior to pandemic, 80% of our clients came to those in-person sites, and we received their applications and processed them on site, and were able to do it successfully in the high 90s, so 97 to 98% of the time. That's not the case right now. So what we've required is in-person, prioritizing those with travel, and to the extent that we can in those mail centers, identifying the files where folks have identified travel and moving those to the front of the queue for processing. We recognize absolutely the challenge that this presents to those Canadians who did the right thing and mailed those applications in, certainly in February and in March. And so we're working aggressively across the department to identify the clients who require transfers to our in-person service so that we can get those passports to them in time for their planned travel.
And thank you for those comments. Could this committee or could even the MPs please get like a written summary of that, written information that can be shared with the MP offices, with the caseworkers around the fact that, you know, the mail-ins are not desirable at this time, and that these are the workarounds, and that these are the problems that are going to come up if you don't have access to come into the walk-in. Like, our offices need to have full and good information so that they can direct folks appropriately. So could we get that in writing, please?
Yes, Ms. Cirillo, absolutely. And in fact, the regional directors for Service Canada sent out correspondence maybe 3 weeks ago to all MP offices across the country with the most up-to-date information, but we can redo that as well. So your office, it didn't go to MPs directly, it went to your staff, so they should have that, but we can do that. And your MP offices should have direct relationships with your local Service Canada director. They're very accessible and responsive, and very happy to follow up on that. I would also note that Service Canada updated its website on Thursday evening to provide as much clarity as possible to Canadians seeking a passport.
Thank you, Minister. And I'll just say, if there could be some information about the $145 expediting fee and the returns on that, I think that was something in my office that I'm not sure that was included in the initial email about how to apply for those refunds and the timing on those refunds.
Sure. So in the initial email, it was clarified that if someone applied and their application was complete and they had not received their passport within the service standard, that they should not be charged that. And that information has been reiterated to all frontline Service Canada staff, both in person and on the phone. But we can certainly share where citizens can apply for a refund if they had been charged that fee erroneously.
Thank you.
So you have 5 seconds left, so we will get to a second question with you, I believe. So at this time, Madame Gladue, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. So before the 600 employees were hired, about how many employees did you have processing passports here in Canada?
Approximately 1,500. We have around 2,200 right now.
Okay, about 1,500. So really, you know, you're adding, you know, almost another third of your contingent. But really, the increase in passports, you said you're expecting 4.2 million this year. That's a 250% increase from the number that you processed in 2021. So even if you've increased employees 30%, and the expectation is that things are going to go up 250%, and that's before we include the 10-year renewals that are coming at us next year. So I guess what plans do you have to further either increase staff? I know you've increased hours, but to address what looks to be a tsunami headed our way?
Let me start and then I'll turn it over to officials to take it from there. But one of the things that's a bit of a challenge for us is that Service Canada doesn't do the forecasting. IRCC does the forecasting. And so the original forecast for this year was about 2.4 million passports, which gets us into the ballpark of where things were pre-pandemic. Now, you can't necessarily forecast for human behavior, and so that's one of the things why we've made a lot of changes over the past couple of months. So we did anticipate a big increase, a doubling of the number of passports, but right now we're seeing a quadrupling of the number of passports that are in demand, and we're seeing them happen all at the same time, right? So the difference pre-pandemic is that the reason why it was predictable is because you knew there were about 2.5 million passports needing to be renewed, but they would happen over the course of the year. What we're seeing is, a big chunk happening all at the same time, but I'll turn it over to Lori to talk about what we're doing in terms of planning ahead.
Great, thanks. A couple of things. Aside from the 600 that we've already hired, we're actually hiring on a weekly basis, so we anticipate doubling at least that hiring over the course of the next several weeks. So we have hiring processes underway constantly. We're also realigning approximately 600 staff within Service Canada right now to the passport offices. So we'll take staff from other jobs. We do an evaluation with respect to where we have some flexibility to assign to passports. And at the same time, one of the things that we put in place in anticipation of the 10-year passport was technology to support intake at all 317 Service Canada centres. So that capacity didn't exist prior to the pandemic, but does exist now, and it will help meter what happens in terms of people coming in with their passport applications.
Okay, very much. Thank you. Through the chair to the minister, there were 2,700 government employees that were on leave without pay due to their vaccination status. And of course, we know now that, members from all parties are out gallivanting amongst the unvaxxed. And so I wondered if there were any of those 2,700 that might be able to be brought back to work in order to augment the workforce.
So right now we're respecting the policy that's been put in place in terms of staff members requiring a vaccine. For Service Canada, we have about 249 who are off, who have refused vaccination for various reasons, but that doesn't impact our entire program overall. We have about 29,000 staff. Those 249 are spread across the department overall. So there's no impact on us really in terms of passport applications or processing. And we meter out the work in other areas to augment that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we can't bring them back considering there's no mandates anywhere else and other countries have all dropped theirs, and we certainly need the folks that are trained to do the work. I could share similar stories to the ones that Ms. Kuzi, has indicated. People that were unable to visit dying relatives. I had one particularly awful story of a fellow who had been in the country for 10 years from Vietnam, and he had never been anywhere. And there was an opportunity for them to go to a family wedding. And so 6 months in advance of the wedding, he actually applied for the documentation that he needed to travel and heard nothing back, escalated it through my office. I tried the line for MPs. I escalated it to the immigration folks as well. And unfortunately, he missed this life experience, which can't be gotten back. And so I guess, as you've indicated, that people should go in person. We have had a lot of stories of overload at the in-person kiosks where people are lining up like hours before they open and still not being able to be managed. Is there any way that people can be aware before they show up of whether there's any chance of them being processed that day?
You answer. I need unanimous consent to continue as the lights are indicating a vote has been called. It's my understanding it's a 30-minute bell. So do we have unanimous consent to proceed to 1 o'clock? Close to it? Okay, I see unanimous consent. Minister, a brief answer, please.
Well, I will actually turn it over to Mr. Simeone to talk about the measures we've taken to get people through offices quicker.
So in addition to all of the staffing that we've been talking about, we've introduced an appointment system, and the numbers we were looking at just this morning told us that we have 223,000 appointments between the months of April and August. So that's a lot of space going forward for clients to find a way in to Service Canada Centre. And lineups have been a challenge. There's no doubt about that. And we are changing how we're operating, moving staff around. So if there's a lineup in the morning, open all the counters, get that line moving in as the day progresses and people are not waiting. And we've opened up waiting rooms as well. We can do other things in the back. So there's a variety of measures. So we're trying to make it easier on people, particularly as summer comes. We do not want people lining up outside unnecessarily. And so about 11 of our 35 offices have a chronic lineup problem. So that's a lot, but it's not all 35. So we're working on that, and we expect things to get a lot better. On contact centers, we're looking at right now, as of this morning, 27 minutes to 55 minutes wait time, which is, it's not instantaneous, but at the same time comparable to what clients would experience with other utilities, for example, in the country. So we can be reached.
Thank you, Madame Gladue. Mr. Van Bynen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to build on the reference to other countries. Firstly, thank you, Minister, for sharing your thoughts with us here today. But we've heard that increased demands for passports is an issue in many countries around the world, and others are facing similar situations. According to The Guardian, and the UK Passport Office is advising that passport wait times have tripled and clients should plan accordingly. And according to ABC in Australia, officials have also warned clients to expect longer than normal processing times, and it seems that this is something that our counterparts are also grappling with. So could you please add some international context to what we're seeing here in Canada with passports? What does the scale of the demand and our response look like in comparison?
Certainly. I think that, around the world, and particularly in similar countries to Canada, there's a great demand to travel. I mean, people were at home for 2 years, and so now they're ready to get back out and see the world. So the situation that we're experiencing in Canada is actually not unique. And other countries are also struggling with the increase in demand and passports that have expired over those past 2 years. So just to put it into context, in Australia, they're recommending at least 6 weeks before to apply for a passport. In Ireland, it's about 8 weeks for mail-in service. New Zealand, they have an online system, so it's a bit faster, 22 working days. In the UK, they're saying up to 10 weeks to get a passport. The United States is routine processing 8 to 11 weeks, and in fact, their expedited processing is 5 to 7 weeks. In Sweden, it's actually 27.7 weeks to get an appointment for a passport, and France as well. They actually don't tell you what the wait time is, but to expect serious delays. So not to give any excuses or justification whatsoever, it's just that when you design a passport system in Canada or around the world, you do it in a way to, maximize efficiency. And because passports typically are quite predictable, they're not really built for these massive surges. And so even though we've taken a whole range of measures in terms of hiring an additional 600 staff, probably hiring another 600 staff, moving, 600 internally, it is, there's a huge demand right now. And the other thing that I'll just add on that is the Canadian passport is a document that has a lot of integrity. Right? It's recognized around the world. It's a secure document. And so while, we're able to expedite documents on an urgent basis, it has to go through a really rigorous process because we need to ensure that that integrity is maintained. So, we're doing everything we can to speed it up, but we're not, unfortunately, out of line with many of our international counterparts.
To build on the issue around the expedited process which was introduced. There are risks and benefits to this new process. For example, are there any considerations related to security, and what impacts has the introduction of the new process done for processing times, and what are the risks that might be related to that?
I'll turn it over to Ms. McDonald for that.
Thanks very much. Integrity is one of the most important pieces of our passport program. And it's why when the minister referred to the new applications for people who've never had a passport before and children, integrity is a goal of that passport. So it takes longer in terms of reviewing that information. But above and beyond that, we do special training with our frontline staff on integrity and what to look for in terms of things like fraudulent cases or cases where we see interruption from other countries, as an example. We work very closely with our intelligence communities to share information with us. We have monthly updated sessions with our frontline officers, all with the goal to ensuring that integrity is achieved in each of our passport applications. And that's one area where we don't compromise on when we're looking at streamlining processes and supporting how more efficiently we can process a passport. So that's the first goal. So we look at things that we can do that are easier to streamline, that are what we call low-hanging fruit, where we can omit something from the process to make it move more quickly. So the example would be the new renewal process that we put in place, where we now allow a passport to be 15 years old and a shorter processing time.
Oh, well, you're so kind, Mr. Van Bynen. Thank you. And now, Madame Chabot, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, my view is that Service Canada is not doing a good job. We're talking about the number of employees covering passport processing. A little earlier, we heard about the number of employees dealing with employment issues. Service Canada, in both cases, was dealing with a surge in volume that was predictable and was unable to adapt. There are still people in Rimouski, for example, I heard last week, who are still waiting for their employment insurance payments. And in some cases, we have to, sort of just put up with it, like for employment insurance. And now it looks like we've got to put up with it with passports as well. It certainly looks to me like a management issue, an organizational issue. Do you undertake to strengthen Service Canada so that it can really respond to the needs of workers and citizens? Thank you, Ms. Chabot. Respectfully, of course, I am not in agreement with you because I have traveled across the country, everywhere in Canada, and I have met with the employees of Service Canada, and they are truly dedicated to public service. But we do have a surge in applications here. And as I said earlier before the committee regarding employment insurance, yes, some of the surges are predictable. The winter and the summer peaks, for example. But the Omicron surge and the closures that resulted from that were not predictable. So we saw a good deal more applications throughout the winter, and more specifically in Quebec. Through conversations with you and other MPs in Quebec, we've been able to respond to that. And we have seen many more cases of employment insurance cases handled. It's really quite impressive management of the situation at Services Canada. So thank you for your question and for expressing your concerns, but Service Canada has responded. Back to passports. Yes, we did foresee passport renewal applications surging, but we predicted 2.4 million. We now see that that was insufficient, not the right prediction, and we're adjusting. But what I can assure you is that all the employees of Services Canada are very dedicated to their work. They work really hard. They put in overtime. They work through weekends. And what I've seen, speaking to them personally and up close, is that they really want to provide service. But there's just this great number of applications. I met a Service Canada employee who was exhausted and who explained to me that it's not such a happy place, Service Canada. So I think you must immediately add more resources and with no further delay in order to be able to respond to the needs of citizens and workers in Canada. Thank you, Ms. Chabot. And Ms. Minister.
Zarillo for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the urgency of the passport matter has been well expressed in the committee. And I wanted to pivot to childcare because this is an opportunity for the the parents in BC and French parents in BC for me to advocate for them. So I wanted to share with the minister that I had a meeting with the Francophone Federation of BC recently around some gender discrepancies that happen in the Francophone community. For example, gender-based violence initiatives are being funded through heritage rather than through gender equality. And one of the big concerns that came up in our conversation was the lack of a language clause in childcare agreements between the feds and the province. This is a concern for Francophone families that want to have service in their choice of official language. And I'm wondering if there are discussions or if this is something that is being implemented, is a language clause in these childcare agreements with the provinces to protect the official languages and access to childcare in both official languages.
Certainly, and just to reiterate, Service Canada, the department officials really do feel and understand the urgency of passports and are working around the clock to address it. So thank you for raising that. Just to clarify, there are official language clauses in every single agreement that we have with provinces and territories, with the exception of the asymmetric agreement that we have in Quebec. So there is a requirement that each province and territory create and maintain either the equivalent or greater than the Francophone population in their province or territory. So that is in every single agreement.
And that's interesting because I understand from them that it gets reviewed every 5 years. But what I heard from the Francophone Federation BC was that in these new childcare agreements that was missing. So you're saying that that's not true?
Well, I will be happy to send it to you. All of the agreements are available on our website, as are the 2-year action plans that have been negotiated. So we can find that clause and send it through, but it is part of the agreements. So we have negotiated agreements and action plans, and it's 2-year action plans, and then we have implementation committee meetings between the federal and provincial or territorial governments twice a year to review progress and adjust as needed. And so we're in the process of really starting to renegotiate the next 2-year action plan, and the agreement itself will be up for renewal within 5 years. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be renegotiated. It's likely that it would be renewed, hopefully.
I would be really appreciative of that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Rizzola. If it's the wishes of the committee, we will move to adjourn. We don't have enough time to get another round in, so I see agreement. So with that, Madam Minister, thank you for appearing and your officials and giving detailed answers to the questions from committee members. Thank you again for appearing, and with that, the committee is adjourned.